Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Amanda Lamb. In today's deep dive conversation with WRAL's investigative reporter and documentary producer, Cristin Severance, we're going to talk about her follow-up reporting to our recent documentary about hurricane victims who still don't have housing years later. It's really hard to believe, Cristin. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So first of all, briefly fill us in. The documentary aired this week, and then there was a hearing the day after to talk about this very issue where lawmakers shared about it and they referenced the documentary. So tell us what happened.
Right. So the documentary aired Tuesday night. Wednesday morning, there's this legislative hearing, okay, where lawmakers are talking about it. And I have to say, I've been doing this a long time. It was a very interesting experience to premiere a documentary and then be in the very same room with all of the people who were in the documentary. And I keep saying, I've never been more loved and more hated in one room, because you had the homeowners who were saying, thank you so much for showing what we've been living through. And then you had lawmakers talking about the documentary during testimony, saying everyone needs to watch it. And then, of course, the state agency who was in the documentary, their communications people, they did not like it. But we expected that.
Can you recap for us the basis of the documentary?
Absolutely. So the documentary is Aftermath, North Carolina Hurricane Victims Left Behind. And basically, we looked at all of these victims from Matthew and Florence. So that's 6 years ago and 4 years ago. And more than 3,000 of them still aren't home. They all signed up for this state program called Rebuild NC. State program is in charge of nearly $800 million to get them back into a safe place to live. Well, it's taking a very long time. And these people are either living with family members, living with friends, or they're living in hotels, some of them for years. They have health problems. They are just so fed up, so frustrated. And the documentary really shows what they have to deal with.
And so they didn't testify at this hearing. So who talked at this hearing? Who spoke at this hearing? And what was the tone?
So this hearing was the second hearing that lawmakers held. And the first one was in September. That's where, victims did testify. This was a follow-up hearing. So it was really a check-in to see if this state agency had really done what they said they were going to do. So lawmakers questioned the woman who runs Rebuild NC, Laura Hogshead, for a few hours. They also questioned her boss, Mr. Eddie Buffalo, who runs DPS, and that is kind of Rebuild NC is under DPS, and they questioned him as well. It was tough. You ask about tone. I mean, it was brutal. You've been to these before. These lawmakers
they were going after her and this agency. And the numbers really bear this out. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of change since September, correct? I mean,
right.
What was it, 17 houses or something?
Well, so there were several different numbers that were thrown out. And that was what was interesting. So first of all, you have the lawmakers who are so mad, okay? They are visibly at their wits' end. You have Senator Brent Jackson saying, if you do not improve immediately, he said, I will do everything in my power to get someone in this role who can do the job. You have Senator Danny Britt saying, you have failed. It's time to resign. And you have, Senator Jim Perry saying similar things. Well, Laura Hogshead has this presentation and has slides saying, look, we have made progress. She said it's not enough, but we have made progress. And so she'll put these numbers up. But then the lawmakers would kind of drill down on those numbers. And they'd say, wait a minute. So you're saying things are improving, but then they'd ask their follow-up questions and you kind of see they really aren't that great.
And there was a staggering statistic about in order to use the money that's been received, I guess the federal money for this program, they would have to rebuild 60 houses a month.
60 houses a month. And so you asked about numbers. So in September, they were at 5 homes a month. Okay? They were
Which is nothing.
It's nothing.
When you're looking at 3,000 people.
Exactly. And so they were able to, get things moving after the September hearing. And she said they're now at 17 homes a month. Lawmakers said, that is just not enough.
And a big part of your documentary was questioning her leadership and whether or not she should stay in this job.
Mm-hmm.
And many people have called for her resignation. But over and over, it sounds like when you spoke with her, she felt like this was something she wanted to continue to do.
She said, look, if we were to replace me, she said, if I were to get replaced, and she also said this several times throughout the interview, she said if any member of her senior leadership team was replaced, it would only slow things down for homeowners. She repeatedly said that, not just about herself, about her team. She said she has the right team in place. Well, a few days after our interview, a person very high up in that agency, Ivan Duncan, who was in charge of program delivery, he resigned. And so you have all of these things kind of happening, and you're just wondering,
who's running the show? Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about human beings. We're not talking about numbers. We're talking about people. I covered these hurricanes, and one of the things that has always struck with me when you are covering the aftermath is they will come in and tell you, the state will come in and tell you, this is unsafe. You can't live in this home. There's mold. There's all sorts of problems. Visibly, a lot of these homes don't even look that bad,
right,
but they're quote unquote unsafe. What's to stop these people while they're sitting in these hotel rooms from just saying, I'm done. I'm going back to my house. Right. They're not fixing it.
Right. And that's such a great question. And one of the families in the documentary tried to do that. They fixed up their home. They tried to paint over the water damage, but then that's not allowed under the program rules. If you do that, if you do work to your house or you live in the house.
You basically are dropping out.
Right, which people have done. People have gotten so fed up with this. They have no insurance. They have no money. They're like, forget it. I can't deal with this anymore. And you also asked about numbers. In the September hearing, they had said, and Senator Jim Perry brought this up, they wanted to get 115 families who had been living in hotels over a year. The goal was to get those families back home by Christmas. So Senator Perry gets up there. He goes, okay, here we go. How many of those 115 families have gotten in? 18.
Wow. We'll be back after the break with more from Cristin Severance on what state lawmakers plan to do to help these hurricane victims who were left behind. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm talking with Cristin Severance about a state hearing on the plight of hurricane victims who are still without homes years later. So, Cristin, I know that you got a lot of feedback, you said, at the hearing from lawmakers. Have you talked to any of the families? Some of them they didn't speak at the hearing, right, but they were at the hearing. What are they telling you about the documentary and their feelings about it?
Oh, it was so great to see the families. They said they really felt like people can understand now what they've been living with. I talked with Geraldine Williams. They've been in a hotel room for years at this point. And she said, my hotel room was a mess, but she's like, that's my life. Imagine just living in one room day after day. She said, all my stuff's everywhere. She does dialysis 10 hours a day. All of her 38 boxes are in there.
That was one of the things that really struck me. They send the dialysis, gear and
right,
things that she needs for that to the hotel room.
Right.
And it's in these huge boxes that are just everywhere.
Right. And Christmas is coming up. And so these people are going to have to spend their holidays in this room. So it was, they thought that it really showed what they've been going through. And they are just hopeful that some action will finally happen.
I mean, another thing that struck me, they don't have kitchens. I mean, they can't cook. They're really at such a disadvantage in so many ways.
And Amanda, they don't get a stipend. They don't get money from the state.
They just get the hotel room paid for.
Right.
In other words, so they have to eat out for every meal.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
How much money that would be?
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And just a lot of heartache. I mean, that's the one thing that really struck me listening to their stories in the documentary was just so much heartache. Losing a home isn't just about losing a structure. It's about losing your life. This is your life. This is where your family gathers. This is where your memories are. So it's more than just a home. So what are the lawmakers saying about the documentary? I know you mentioned a couple things in the first half of the program, but were any of them really surprised? Did they learn things? Were they like, wow, this is really a lot worse than I thought it was?
I think so. I think to see it all, and there has been some really great comprehensive reporting on this by, Lisa Sorg at NC Policy Watch, Colin Browder here at WRAL. People have done great stories on this and really followed up. I think for the lawmakers to see it all in one place, to sit down and watch it all, they said it was very impactful. And the accountability, we asked Governor Cooper, why have you not made a change at the top? And do you think this program is successful? And he says, no, it is taking too long to get these people home. I asked Laura Hogshead, the director, who said, this is on me. She said, these are my policy decisions. I asked her, why have you not resigned? She said, it'll take too long.
Wow. So a lot of people that maybe aren't stepping up to be accountable for the situation. And you mentioned Lisa. I was really impressed with her reporting as well. And in many ways, the documentary gave a voice to what she's been saying for a long time.
Right. And visually, that's why she loved it. She'd been telling these stories, but it's such a visual story. You need to be in there with them in those hotel rooms. You need to hear from them. Franklin Jones, he and his wife have lived in that hotel. He is you can feel his desperation when he's on screen. It's just, it sticks with you.
And I think the other thing that really stuck with me was that they started on some of these homes and then they stopped. So they had this hope that, they're going to do something.
Right.
And then they go and rip part of the house apart and then they just leave it.
Right.
So they're worse off than they were before.
Exactly. Like the Williams home, there was foundation damage. And then they signed up for rebuild. A contractor came in, removed bricks, and then left the home. The home, there are no walls.
So it's done.
Right.
Yeah. It just needs to be taken down
at
this point. So the next hearing is in March. Mm-hmm. Is there anything between now and then that can make a difference for these families?
There are groups that are helping. There's a coalition in Goldsboro. There's a nonprofit. There are people who are trying to do something. In terms of the state, the proof is in the numbers. They've gone from 5 to 17. Lawmakers said they need to 5 to 17 a month.
Ramp it way up.
It way up. But at a certain point, the lawmakers said that in September. They said it in December. The next hearing is March.
So what's going to happen is the big question.
Right. Are you just going to keep saying you need to do more? Or is action going to be, taken
to make sure that these families get some relief? Yeah. And you mentioned Goldsboro. Marmac is an area in Wayne County that was significantly damaged during Hurricane Floyd. Right. The flooding there was unbelievable. So these are communities that have been dealing with this for so long. And Rebuild will say, they don't want to just put a house in the same spot. And that's another reason why it's taking so long. They want to put it up, make sure it doesn't flood the next time.
Exactly.
Right.
And so it is, as I've told you before, it's a complicated process. There's red tape. There's HUD rules. Some of the family situations are complicated. Maybe the home is not in the homeowner's name. There's definitely
a lot of bureaucracy.
Exactly. And, Senator Jim Perry said at the hearing, this is why people hate government. This situation.
Absolutely. Well, I know you will continue to follow this. Can you let people know now where they can see the documentary?
Absolutely. You can go to WRAL.com. You'll see it right under the documentaries tab, or you can go to the WRAL documentary YouTube page. It's right there. You can watch Aftermath, and you can see all of the other documentaries we've done this year.
Great. Thank you so much. Great work on this, Cristin, and I really appreciate you sharing your reporting with us this morning. Thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email that's waiting in your inbox every morning with Triangle news, events, and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.